K Manor Musers, and I'm here today to share with you our sleeper slipper pattern. It's one of our most popular patterns, and for good reason, because it's a great way to put little warm coverings on your feet when it's really cold out there. So I want to share with you what you will need to be able to do the slippers. First of all, you'll need the pattern, and the pattern comes with the pattern pieces, which I'll walk through with you in a moment. You'll need to pick out 2 coordinating fabrics that you'd like to use. You'll need a pair of scissors. And one of our favorite tools is these things we call clover clips. So they have it in this larger size and they have it in this smaller size. We love them because it helps you hold your pieces of fabric together without getting poked all the time. However, you will still need some pins as well to pin the pattern pieces onto the fabric. And we always recommend that you use these long pins with great big heads so that they don't get lost in your fabric. So one of the fun parts of making the slippers is deciding which kind of fabric you want to use. So one of the very first slippers that I actually made were from what we call Shannon Fabrics. It's the name of the manufacturer. And they have something they call Cuddle 3, which is something with a short pile, but it's very soft. So I ended up choosing this fabric, and I chose one for the inside that was, similar but a different color. And one of the fun things about the slippers is you can actually have them be reversible if you'd like them to be reversible. That way when it gets dirty, all you have to do is flip it around and use the other side. Just kidding, you should probably actually wash them. But you can use either side that you want. So this set of slippers was made with Cuddle 3 for both the outside and the inside. So other choices that you can make, this one actually was made with Easy Fabrics, and it has a soft, much deeper pile for the outside, and it also has a deep, fun, furry fabric for the inside. So you can choose heavier piles for both of them, like I did for this one. Or another one I chose to do was this one. It's with what they call their snow leopard. So it has a fuzzy fabric, a deep pile on the outside, and on the inside it has just one of their Cuddle 3 fabrics. But then this time I chose to put a suede on the bottom. So you can see that I just made the sole out of a suede fabric so that it would be a little bit less slippery. I know it was really fun when my daughter helped me write the patterns. She ended up writing something like, hey, well, if you want a pair of hallway skis, these are great because they're really slippery. So be really careful when you're walking around on floors that are slick because sometimes these are slick. You can also use some of that fabric that they make that has the little dots on it. So if you want it to be a little bit less slippery, you can choose to make the soles out of that fabric that has the little dots so that it will have a little bit more grip when it's walking across the floor. On this one as well, I choose to sneak outside to get the paper or to take the trash out or, crazy things like that. And I wear them around the house more. So I know you can't see it, but in between the 2 layers here, I have some of those Shoals inserts. So it's got a bit more of a padding on it, rather than just like a pair of slippers. But today I'm going to do one that I haven't done before, and I'm going to use a Cuddle 3 fabric on the outside that's a thinner pile, and then I'm going to use they call it their Luxe Cuddle, but it's a thicker pile on the inside so that I have more fur around my foot, but a prettier design on the outside. So once you've picked the 2 fabrics that you want, you'll need about 15 inches by 30 inches. So it doesn't take much to make these slippers, just about 15 by 30. And you can make any size from like size 5 maybe for adults up to size 11. So the next thing you want to do is pull out your pattern. And the pattern's really simple because there's really only 2 pieces to the pattern. So one of them is the slipper top and one of them is the slipper bottom or the sole. And you'll need to cut 2 out of the top fabric of the tops and 2 out of the bottom fabric for the tops. And then the same thing for the lining. You'll need 2 tops and 2 bottoms out of the lining fabric. So in order to figure out what size you need, we made it in this pattern in 4 sizes. So there's a small, a medium, a large, and an extra large. And the way you figure out which pattern size you want to use is I put the pattern piece on the floor and then I just place my foot on it. And you want to make sure that your heel is inside of the heel line and your toe is inside of the toe line, but you just barely want it to be inside. You don't want a bunch left over, and you definitely don't want your toe hanging over or your heel hanging over. So just make sure it fits as neatly inside of those 2 marks as you possibly can. So once you get that, what I do is I cut out around the pieces that I'm going to use. And on this one, where it's the slipper top, really the only difference is small, medium, large, extra large. So it actually gets longer as your foot gets longer. So when you cut this out, I would say cut out all the way down to the extra large size and then just fold it up to the size that you're going to use. So I have cut those pieces out and used them a ton, so you can see a bunch of pin marks in these. But you'll see my size medium bottom, and I'm going to make a size medium top. So all I'm going to do is on this pattern as well, the dashed lines indicate that it is a sewing line, and the straight or solid lines indicate that it is a cutting line. So what you're going to want to do if you're a medium is fold it up along where it says medium, and then just make sure you push this little piece back when you want to cut out around the slipper. So the next thing you're going to do is figure out where you want to place this on your fabric. So a couple things about cuddle fabric. Oftentimes there is a nap. So if you pet the fabric, I call it one way, just like you're petting a cat, it will feel really soft and smooth going that way. And if you put it the other way, it will really push against the design, like you're pushing against a kitty's fur. So once you figure out which way that nap is, then you'll want to decide which way you want to put your pattern piece on. Do you want the nap to be running down from your ankle down to your toes? Or do you want the nap to be running up from your toes to your ankles? So decide which way you want the nap. And then the other thing you'll want to do is to look at if your pattern has a design in it, where do you want your primary focus to be? So with this one, I might want my primary focus to be right here and put one of these really pretty roses right where my foot's gonna be. So I have to make sure it will fit. Right now I have the fabric folded in half because I want to make sure that a top and a bottom will fit on half of it exactly where I want it to be. So with the more, what should I say? The deeper pile one. So some of the deeper pile ones, they definitely have a nap, but some of them don't really have a nap. Like this one, I could turn it anyway and probably be happy with it being cut out any direction, really. The one thing you will want to watch is there's not much stretch in the lengthwise, but sometimes there is a little bit of stretch, not a lot, in the crosswise grain. So if you want your slipper to have more stretch over your foot, then you might want to place it this way, because then it will have more stretch going across your foot. If you want your slipper to have more stretch going down your foot, you might want to put it this way, so it has a little bit more stretch going that way. So you can choose which way you want that to be. So I am going to pull out the piece of fabric that I still need to use to make the top of the slipper. So which one did I like? I think I like that one. I like that one. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and cut out the top and the bottom. And if there is a design on it, I usually like to do it just one piece of fabric at a time. so that I can make sure I can see it where I wanted it. I've decided I want the nap to run down, down my slipper. So, and I think I want to put this pretty little rose right in the center. So I'm going to put it there. And if you were a perfectionist, you would, look at this line, which is exactly, the center of the slipper. And you would make sure it's exactly the right distance from here to here. But if you're me, you eyeball it and you go, hey, that looks pretty darn close. But my camera person back there, my cute little daughter, she would definitely be measuring this within 1/100th of a millimeter to make sure that it's on the straight grain. But they do turn out better that way, so nice job, Kayla. So, again, I'm going to have this folded up where the medium is and folded up here where the medium is. And then I'm going to take my sole and say, do I care where that is? Maybe I want that little flower and a couple of those flowers in the sole. And again, you could make sure it's exactly on the straight of grain, or you can be terrible like me and say, hey, that looks pretty darn close. So the next thing you're going to do is just grab a pair of scissors, and you're going to cut all the way around the outside edge, which again is much easier if you've already cut the pattern piece out, so you're not cutting the piece of paper at the same time you're cutting the fabric. So again, I folded it up along the medium cut line, and I'm cutting along there, and I'm just going to cut up the side of the slipper. And if you've ever been out to our website, you will see that there's like different kinds of slippers. So there's actually a suede bottom slipper out there where the top is all fuzzy, but the bottom is suede. And then there's a there's even a version out there that has it's out of suede, and it's like little bunny slippers. And the way I came up with that idea was when I cut this little piece out, I said, holy cow, that looks just like a bunny ear. So when I got done, I just cut another bunny ear, and then I had it hanging off of here, and I put little eyeballs and a nose, and we made it bunny slippers. So you can make bunny slippers here too if you'd like. So there's the top, and then we're just going to cut out around the sole. And we'll go around this way. And around the top of the foot. Okay, and if you didn't quite get it right, you can go back and you can straighten up those edges just a bit if you want. But I think that is pretty darn close. So you'll also notice there's cuddle dust when you cut with cuddle fabric. It will make a mess when you are first cutting it, but when you're done cutting it and after you shake off what we call the cuddle dust, if you've bought high quality fabric, it won't ever fray again. So it does make a mess when you're cutting it, but when you're done, it will work out great. My daughter did mention, I went ahead and cut out the two bottoms, and I cut out another top and a bottom over here, and I cut out the two soles. But my daughter did say I should mention that when you're cutting this really fluffy fabric, so here's another piece that can be used for another set of slippers. We typically take the pattern, we fold all of the soft fuzzy stuff on the inside, and because this time I'm really not trying to make it, put a design in it, you can go ahead and cut out, both layers at the same time, so you can put on the top pattern and, oh, here we go, and the bottom pattern at the same time. And if you keep the fuzzy side in, it's a little bit easier. It's a little bit easier to cut and a little bit less messy, but I already cleaned up all the cuddle dust off of her table. I just did whoosh.
That's going in the bloopers.
Okay, we're back. So we're gonna just put together the outside of the slipper right now. So you should have a top and a bottom. So what we're gonna do is fold this in half, and we're gonna line up those two edges. and I'm going to take a couple of my favorite little clover clips here and hold them together. And everything on this pattern has like a 1/4 of an inch seam. So it's a pretty small seam. I also use a kind of a longer stitch. So, you know, here's the really short stitch and here's the really long stitch, like a basting stitch. Somewhere in the middle of that is what you want to use, and maybe a little bit to the right, so a little bit of a longer stitch. Because what I have found is that with cuddle fabrics, the feed dogs just don't seem to pull it quite as quickly. So sometimes it helps to just have your stitch a little bit longer. I also sometimes try to back stitch right at the top and right at the bottom to make sure that it's not going to come undone. So now you have this is by your heel, so this is the heel, and it's going to look like this now. So the next step is going to be to attach the sole to the top of the slipper. And one thing you just really want to make sure is on the pattern pieces, there really were little things here, like right in the center, right in the heel, and then right here. So you can either take those and mark those on your pattern, or the other thing you can do is just fold your heel exactly in half, and then I put one pin right there at the fold, and then fold, make sure the toe is exactly in half, and put one little pin right there. And then same here, you already know exactly where the back of your foot should be, but then if you fold this so it's exactly in half, and you can put one pin right there, maybe at the fold. So you know this is the exact center of the slipper. Because what I've seen when we've taught this class is if people don't do that, then when they're trying to put the top to the bottom, they will oftentimes just have this just a little bit skiwampus, and then their slipper ends up being, I don't know any better way to say than crooked. So once you've lined up those two pins, you can take one of them out and make sure it stays right there. Again, you've got right sides together. You're going to hook the sole to the top of the slipper, and then I'm going to open up this seam back here, and I'm going to pull out that pin and put it right back in. So now you'll see I have basically the top of the slipper and the heel of the slipper, or the end of the slipper by my toes, and the bottom. So the next part is just a hair tricky. So what you're going to want to do is grab a bunch of your little clover clips, in my case, or you can use pins, just don't poke yourself. You're going to want to put a little bit, just a little bit extra of the fabric wherever there's a curve. So up here you can see there's a curve. So I'm just going to make sure, what you don't want to do is stretch it the wrong way around the curve. You want a little bit extra fabric in by your toe. And then you're just going to keep putting these little guys in, and I usually just work towards the middle. And then it should, where it's the nice straight stretch, or straight stretch, where you're going to just be sewing straight, it should work out great. Okay, then you're going to flip around to the other side, and of that top fabric, the top of your foot, you're going to just make sure you don't pull it. If anything, put just a little bit extra in around your toes, and then keep clipping. And sorry, I need more of my favorite little clips. And we'll go here, and here, and here. And you can see I put my clips pretty darn close to each other because cuddled fabric tends to slip and slide. And so you don't want it to do that. You want the two pieces to stay exactly where you want them to stay. So right now, you can see I have little clips all the way around the bottom of the sole. And with that, we're gonna go to the sewing machine. Okay, so now we're gonna take this little unit over to the sewing machine. And what I do is take out one of the clips, and then I'm going to put it under my sewing machine. And again, this is going to be just a 1/4 inch seam. So it's a pretty narrow seam to hold these together because you don't want a bunch of bulk in your slipper. So again, just make sure that those 2 layers stay exactly where you wanted them to stay. And as you're going around the heel and the toe, again, because you're going around that curve, just try to make sure you don't get any of those famous little, what are they called? Bumps. Okay, here we go. And, you know, probably one of the most important things for me is when you get right to the center on the front, I don't take that pin out until I'm just about to run over it. So I do want to take it out obviously before I run over it. I've done that a few times, which is not a great thing for your sewing machine or your needles. So yeah, don't do that. So we're going to keep going. And all the way around the side. We had one comment on our website to say, hey, you never show you guys sewing. You just kind of cut and say I'm sewing. So we thought we would at least sew one of these all the way around for you. Okay, when you get to the heel here again, you're just going to have to make sure you watch it so you don't get any little folds in your fabric as you're going around that curve. And again, when you get right to the back, you can take that pin out and make sure that your seam is open. The seam that you had back there by your heel is open, so half the seam goes one way and half goes the other way. And just keep going. And when you get back to where you started, just go ahead and go past it a ways, and then you can even backstitch just a bit. All right, so pull that off, and what you should have is a little slipper that looks like this. So you've got the bottom hooked onto the front, and when you turn it inside out, it's going to look like this. I oftentimes too, because it's a curve around your foot, you can use your scissors. You can use your scissors to make just the little clips in here, so that it will turn a little bit, and you won't have quite as much bulk in there. So we'll just be really careful that you don't cut the bottom of the slipper, or that you don't cut through the stitching line. Okay, with that, I am going to go ahead and do the other one that looks just like. Ready? Oh, it's already going? Okay, so now we're just going to do the inside of the slipper. So it's the warm fuzzy stuff. And what I did was I matched the heel and I matched the toe again, and I used the little clips to go all the way around the outside edge. The fuzzy cuddle is more difficult to sew with. It's definitely slipperier, and I don't know if you can see this right here, but when I put the clip on right here, you can see that it actually folded over. So you'll want to go and look on both sides and make sure that it's just nice and flat all the way around the outside edge. And then I typically sew from the sole side, and then just making sure that I don't get any, what do you call it, when you pinch it together and it stays that way. On the inside of the slipper, we're also going to leave a hole about that big. So when you get around to the other edge, this one is important to backstitch, so go ahead and backstitch around there, and go ahead and stitch all the way around the toe, making sure that you keep both edges of that raw edges of the fabric up against that 1/4 inch seam. And I'm going to show you a couple more things when I get around. So going around the toe, now going down the straightaway, and down towards the heel. And just trying to keep your fabric really, really flat on the back side so that you don't get any little folds in your fabric. Keep going around. Okay, and we're about around to where we started again. And like I said, I'm going to leave about that much space, and I'm going to go ahead and back stitch right here and pull it out. Okay, I was going to show you a couple other things on this one. So what you'll notice, maybe if you can see this is like an aqua colored fabric, but I used a pink color thread. So sometimes it's really helpful to use a contrasting thread rather than a thread that's exactly the same color. Because, for instance, I'm going to look on the front here and see if I got any little folds, any little nicks, any little folds. And luckily, I don't see any. That's amazing. But if you did, it's a lot easier to use your seam ripper to pull out that thread if it's a different color than your fabric, because you will never see that thread with the fabric because there's too much of a pile. The other thing that I highly recommend when you're working with this fluffy fabric is that you put your hand in and you actually run around all the seam right there. That's where I actually left a hole on purpose. But sometimes one of the pieces will slip in and you won't realize that it only caught the fur on the edge instead of actually catching the knit part of the fabric that's with it. So it looks like we're good. So with that, we're going to go ahead and put the two pieces together. Okay, so now we have the inside of the slipper and the outside of the slipper, and now we're going to put the two of them together. So you want to make sure, again, that you left a hole in your lining, and you're going to turn the lining right side out and the outside inside out. Anyway, we want to put right sides together. So what you're going to do is take this slipper and stuff it inside of that slipper, and then we're going to match the seam that was on the back of both of them. And this time I really do use a pin to make sure that those two stay exactly in place. And then I should have marked the exact front of the slippers. You can if you'd like, or you can just make sure that you pull it and it is exactly in the center. Again, I'm going to use a pin on that one to make sure that I keep the front around my ankle exactly there. And then I'm going to take little clover clips and put them all the way around the straightaway edges on both sides. And last clip. So now we're going to be able to take this over to our sewing machine again. Ooh. Look again on both sides and make sure that your clip didn't fold over any of the fabric where you did not want it folded over. Okay, we're good. Then you can go ahead and set that under your sewing machine. And again, with just a 1/4 of an inch seam, make sure both of your seams are open on the back of your heel. And we're just going to be going around this part that goes around your ankle with, again, a 1/4 of an inch seam. And going right there to that pin that's at the very front, making sure it doesn't move. And then keep going around. And we're coming down the home stretch here. And around the back of the heel again. And then you can back stitch it and pull it off. And then you're just going to want to check your seam, make sure that there's no little goobers in there. And I have one little part right here where it's really, really, really close to the edge of the fabric. So because I don't want that to come undone later when I'm putting my foot in and out, it's more like an 1/8 of an inch seam because, like I said, that fabric slides a lot. I just went over it again and turned it into a 1/4 of an inch seam. Okay, there we go. Then what you're going to want to do is clip this curve, making sure you only clip right to the seam. Don't clip through your seam. And you don't really need to do the back. You really just need to do what's here in the front because it's on the big curve. And there we go. Okay, so now the fun part. You get to, here's your slipper. You have to find that hole that you left somewhere down here in the bottom. We know we had it. And what you're going to do is reach in that hole and pull the slipper, all of the slipper through that hole. Whoops. Try not to throw it on the floor. Pick it back up. Keep pulling. The bigger the hole you leave, the easier it is to pull it through, but the more that you have to close later. So take your pick. Large hole, big sewing, small hole, a little bit harder. But now we're just going to keep stuffing it through there. And then you're going to take your little slipper and push the lining in towards the front and out towards the back. And then that little hole that you left right here, you'll just want to slip stitch that shut. And I don't know. So this was intended to be the outside of the slipper and the inside of the slipper. But let's see what happens if we decide we want to flip it around. You could have a really fun little aqua slipper with a rose lining. So take your pick. You can do it either way. With that, I want to show you one more thing. Hi there. So one more thing before we close today. That pattern that I shared with you to make this slipper, that's for adults. We also have one for kids. It's called Tiny Toes. And basically it has 6 different sizes in it. It's the same method to put it together, and it has 6 different sizes like I mentioned. Starts out with little itty bitty ones. So for a little tiny newborn, we got those. Or, like I mentioned, I have 4 little granddaughters, but now I have a little grandson. It's so exciting. So you can make little tiny slippers for them. And then when I was showing people all the sizes, I ended up making 1 pair of slippers out of each size. So there's the little itty bitty tiny one. It gets a little bit bigger, gets a little bit bigger, gets a little bit bigger. And then this one is just the size that's right below the adult lady, size 5. So anyway, I hope you have fun making slippers for you and for anyone that might enjoy keeping their little feet warm and cozy when it gets cold. Have a great day.